Do you tend to overthink your mechanics, or do you allow yourself to perform athletically? I was on a coaching call earlier today with a client, and we were talking about this very idea, where she was experiencing a lot of stress and pressure and tension because she was trying to over control her mechanics. And that's something that I see a lot in athletes who are afraid to make mistakes, and they are really caught up in how badly they want to perform well. But what ends up happening a lot is that as they try to over control their mechanics, right? So they're trying to perfect their mechanics and do everything to a T. They end up becoming very robotic and rigid. Now, this happened to me a lot when I was playing baseball in college, because when I was playing baseball, I loved analyzing my swing. I absolutely loved it. I would spend hours watching videos. I would spend hours really focusing on my technique in the batting cage, hitting off of the tee, working on, front toss, batting practice, doing all that, right? Because I love to really analyze and perfect my mechanics. But the downside of this was that I often overthought my mechanics during a game. I didn't quite understand this separation and this idea of letting go that needs to happen when we actually compete. So I would go out there in games and I would fixate on where my hands were. If my hands didn't feel like they were in the right place, or I felt like my separation wasn't good, or my load wasn't good, I didn't have as much confidence in myself. And the truth was, when I was so focused on all those small details, right, all those nitty-gritty details about my technique, what was I not giving as much attention to as I needed to? Simply watching the ball, right? Being relaxed in the moment. And that's the same thing that this athlete and I were talking about today, where she is getting so caught up in trying to perfect every single little aspect of her technique that she's forgetting about this idea of simply being athletic and trusting herself in the moment. And we were going over a time in the past when she was performing really well, and she was talking to me about how she didn't even have as good of technique in the past as she does now. And that's something that's kind of rattling around in her head, and she's wondering, well, how could I have not had as good a technique back then, but I still performed better? How is that even possible? That's really what got us to talking about this idea of just being athletic, because in the past, if her technique wasn't as perfect as she would like, then she wasn't so caught up in perfecting the technique. She accepted that her technique was what it was, and so in order for her to be able to perform well that day, she had to trust her athleticism. Versus now, she knows that her technique is much better. She has incredibly good technique. She's very high level in her sport. But because of that, she's feeling like in order to perform well, she has to have perfect technique. Now, perfect technique is going to help her do even better, but only if she also pairs that with this ability to let go and be athletic in the moment. And so the reason that I wanted to make this episode was to really reinforce this idea of letting go and trusting yourself and allowing yourself to be athletic during performances. Because at the end of the day, you have to remember that you are an athlete, right? You're not a robot. You don't have to make sure that all your technique is perfect. You've performed your sport well and done well in the past when your technique wasn't as good as it is now. And the reason you would have done well is because that's what the natural athleticism is all about. So how does this kind of come together in more of an actionable way? Well, one thing you want to make sure of is that you are working on your technique during practice and training. That's what, this athlete she and I were working on earlier today. That's what I focused on a lot when I played baseball. You have to make sure that you fine-tune your technique. That's always the first part of this, because how are we going to trust something that we don't have, right? Even in the past, she still had techniques in the past that she was trusting. So we need to make sure that we are working on fine-tuning our technique and our mechanics. But the second part of this really has to do with the approach we are taking to competition. And that approach needs to be that we try to let go of controlling things too much. We try to let go of trying to force the result that we want. And we just allow ourselves to be in the present moment and be athletic. So what do I really mean by being athletic? Well, as a baseball player, going back to that example, what I'm talking about is being loose at the plate and allowing yourself to not worry about your technique, but just watch the ball and just put a good swing on the ball, right? Trusting your athleticism. If you're a basketball player, it's about not trying to be too rigid with your jump shot, right? Allowing yourself to feel fluid, feel athletic. As a tennis player, it's allowing yourself to move your feet well, right? Allowing yourself to just feel athletic with going after your shots and not trying to be too perfect with, okay, I'm supposed to hold my racket in this way for my backhand and I'm supposed to be in this position. Allow yourself to just be present and be athletic. Now, I'm using that term be present a lot, and that's because when you try to be athletic or when you're wanting to be athletic, you have to also be present. Because one of the reasons that you'll get in your own way when you perform and you compete and you'll end up causing yourself to be too rigid and technical is because you're thinking about how your technique needs to be. You're thinking about, well, what will be the result if I do this or if I do that? So you're not actually present when you are performing. But when you're present, it starts to strip away a lot of this stress and a lot of the anxiety that you are competing with. And that also allows you to be a lot more just in the moment and a lot more athletic when you are competing. So at the end of the day, don't try to be too perfect with your technique and your mechanics when you play. Yes, you want to make sure that you're doing them well, and you absolutely need to make sure that you are fine-tuning your techniques and your mechanic during practice throughout the week. But when it comes to the competition day, right? When it comes to game day, figure out how you can get yourself to the point where you let go and you just try to be athletic. Because at the end of the day, you have the skills that you have, but you can't force yourself to perform perfectly. And you definitely aren't going to perform up to your potential if you're trying too hard to be perfect with your mechanics and your technique. Trust that your technique is good, but then let go and allow yourself to be athletic. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. I put out new videos each week on sports psychology and mental training. And if you're interested in one-on-one coaching or any of the sports psychology programs I have available, I've put links to those in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I wish you the best of success in all that you do.